I do want to take us out to this post on X from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, in which he says this: Ukraine is now in the fourth year of the full-scale war, preserving its independence, its sovereignty, and our state's ability to achieve and keep achieving the necessary results. We are confident that we will withstand this war, the Ukrainian state, the Ukrainian people. We will defend our independence and our land and the right to an independent national life for Ukrainians, so that our children and grandchildren and their children and grandchildren can live safely on their land and by their own rules. Ukrainians are and Ukrainians will remain on this land where 100 years from now our future generations will stand, and 100 years from now, they will celebrate Ukraine's Independence Day here. Now, there's a lot to get to in terms of the developments within this war between Russia and Ukraine. So to do that, I would like to bring onto the program now Ivana Stradner. She is with the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Now, Ivana, good to see you.
So wonderful to see you. Thank you.
Of course. Let's just start with a recap for our viewers. What's going on the ground right now within this war?
To begin with, I'm very glad that we are talking today about 1991 and Ukrainian independence. It's immensely important because that was the day when Ukraine finally sought its sovereignty and independence 34 years ago. And unfortunately, in 2025, we are still talking about a country that Russia is trying to occupy and where Russia does not even recognize the sovereignty, basically, of Ukraine. So when it comes to facts on the ground, what's going on in Ukraine, Russia believes that Russia is winning, and they're trying to progress on militarily on the ground to basically scare Ukraine and the West, and those tactics are not working. My concern is right now during the negotiation process that the very first fact that every time when we are trying to negotiate with Russia, Putin sends us, to put in quotation mark, a gift, but firing more missiles on Ukraine and making sure that the West is deterred in Ukraine. So I do believe in the coming days and weeks, Putin is going to continue his attacks, I believe, even with more drones. The good news is that Ukraine, it's building its own military industry. There are more weapons. All we really need to do right now is to make sure that the most important security guarantee is a very strong Ukrainian military. Because make no mistake, Putin is going to continue to target the West. Having said that, just a few days ago, when we are talking about facts on the ground, during negotiation process, Putin actually wanted to deter also the United States by attacking our factory in Ukraine, which tells you really all you need to know what is going on the ground.
So just moments ago, I did play out some of the remarks from Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney. We still have that image coming out. So I'm going to bring it here on the screen just to show our viewers kind of the setup here. You see there Prime Minister Carney. You see there Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy shaking hands, really solidifying this partnership. And that brings me to the next part of this interview that I want to touch on. It was earlier this week that not only we saw President Zelenskyy head out to the White House to meet with President Trump, but also several EU leaders. So recap for us what we saw during that meeting, what came out of it. It happened last Monday, so it's been some time.
It's been some time, and it took us also some time after that to recap and to see what's really going on. I do believe that that meeting was significantly more important than the one we saw a few days before that with Putin, because our center of gravity is alliances. And Putin has been trying very, very hard to break that partnership. What we saw on Monday was President Trump leading the effort to unite Europe. On one hand, to talk about security guarantees, to talk about potential stopping the war and how to handle Russia. I also believe that President Trump made sure that Europe is also doing its own part by buying more weapons and sending to Ukraine. They also discussed security guarantees, and there were some disagreements about ceasefire versus long-term peace. And I do believe there is no long-term peace solution without having ceasefire in the first place, because that should be the first signal that Putin is willing to negotiate with the West. Because my concern is that he's buying more time just to reposition his military and then to continue. And some of the European leaders have actually made sure that that Washington also understands that. When it comes to security guarantees, I do believe that that sounds great in theory. I'm very concerned about how we are going to implement that, because it might take some time to get there, which actually might mean that the Kremlin can use that time to buy more time to reposition its military and then to continue. Because for Putin, this is a protracted war. He does not understand this war in the same way like we do. He's willing to sacrifice much more, and time is on his hand. That's precisely why we should not fall for his agenda. And the third point, during that meeting, something was raised in Washington before, was about territory swap and giving up territory. And that's a typical the Kremlin strategy, which is to raise negotiations so high that Ukraine rejects such demands, and then that Zelensky is portrayed as an unreliable partner. That's another game that we should not fall for that. President Trump, just a few days ago, he said that he is going to give Putin a few more weeks. And I do believe that President Trump will. He's already seeing through Putin's games. My concern is that security guarantees in the short run are not going to work, but President Trump has cards to go after Putin. Putin's center of gravity is economy. Putin's center of gravity is energy. Those two things we should target. And the second thing is the most important security guarantee right now for Ukraine is strong Ukrainian military. So allowing Ukraine to use long-range missiles, to send them more long-range missiles, are going to be a powerful weapon against Putin. And my last point is, while we are willing to negotiate with Russia, all you really have to know is yesterday's statements by Russia's Minister of Foreign Affairs, who basically claimed that Putin is more or less not ready to meet Zelensky, which means that even that part of negotiation will be stalled. And in the coming weeks, what I foresee is more blackmails coming from Moscow, in the sense that they might actually increase their attacks. What we saw, an attack on American companies, just another example of sabotage activities against the West that has been happening for a very long time, whether in the UK, whether in Germany. Russia is cutting sea cables. So those type of things are typical KGB strategies, where Putin likes to escalate and then to blackmail the West to try to de-escalate. And we should not be concerned about that. One of the best things that President Trump has done when it comes to a negotiation with Russia is that he completely removed Putin's nuclear threats by claiming to reposition American submarines. That thing is over, and we should not fear that sort of escalation.
So after that meeting that President Trump had with Zelensky and those European leaders, there was a phone call between President Trump and President Putin. Do we know anything about that phone call?
We don't have lots of details about that particular phone call. The only thing that Russia was claiming, actually, he was updated, but the only thing that Russia was claiming that they took advantage of that for their own propaganda, claiming, oh, President Trump even interrupted his own meeting to call the most important person in the room, which was Putin, according to them. So we don't have lots of details, but signals that I see based on President Trump's statement that Putin has a few more weeks tell me a lot, actually, that he delivered also some of the messages what the West, as a united West, can do against Russia.
It's interesting that we continue to talk about the fact that President Trump has given President Putin a few more weeks to kind of see where this could go. But a lot could happen in a few weeks, especially with something that you mentioned earlier, which is that Russia really is willing to put all the cards out there. They're willing to play the long game just to get what they want in the end. So how impactful could that be for Ukraine to continue to have to wait weeks to see this war come to an end?
You're absolutely right. And Putin is going to challenge Washington in terms of crossing our red line and making sure that we enforce it. Words are cheap for Russia. All Putin really understands is the language of power. And that's precisely why we still have cards to play, which is which is very severe sanctions, including secondary sanctions against those countries that are cooperating with Russia, and also to make sure that Ukraine is militarily secure. So that's what I see in the coming days. And I couldn't agree more with you that there is no long peace solution without Putin's first accepting a ceasefire and stop the fighting now. But as I mentioned, we really have to think about this war through Putin's lenses. The world does not revolve around Washington or Brussels or how we think about military doctrine. Russia is waging a very different war. Putin thinks in a zero-sum game. We think always in win-win, that we can talk about business, that we can do some cooperation with Russia. And let me also clarify one thing that I'm very concerned about, which is that one of the games that Putin is playing right now is to make sure that Washington falls into those tricks and is willing actually to play the game when it comes to business. So that's precisely why Putin brought his business advisor with him to talk about business, because he understands that here we love to talk about win-win strategy. That's a game. Peace through trade never worked. It will not work this time either. So we should not fall for that trick either.
Now, Ivana, just to wrap up all of the developments that we saw within the last few weeks, because there were big moments between the meeting of President Trump and President Putin in Alaska to the meeting between President Trump, Zelensky, and European leaders. I mean, there was a lot in terms of what could come next for that war between Russia and Ukraine. Anything in particular that really stood out to you that you think we're not talking about enough, but we should have our eye on?
I think there are two particular things that we have to give a credit where credit is due, which is that on Monday, we saw that the West is united and we have to talk in one voice. But there is also something else that I want to talk about, Corral, just briefly. One thing that we are not seeing is Russia's so-called new generation of warfare, Russia's sabotage activities across the West. Putin is already at war with us, and we have to acknowledge that. And we have to acknowledge that that type of war, it's a silent war, it's a hybrid war that is oftentimes not visible to an average person, but military experts understand that, and we should absolutely not fear Putin's games, because after all, with United West, we are much stronger than Russia.
Ivana Stradner, a senior research fellow there with the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. We always appreciate your time here at Live Now from Fox to help break down all of these developments, and we're going to keep monitoring the situation. So we'll check in with you soon.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for your kind invitation.
Of course. You have a good rest of your day. I do want to pivot now and showcase some more of these social media posts that we're getting, because as we were talking about within that last conversation, there's a lot of support when it comes from Western countries over to Ukraine amid their war with Russia. So I do want to start off with this one from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, saying this: "I'm grateful to His Majesty King Charles III for his cordial wishes to all Ukrainians on our Independence Day. His Majesty's kind words are a true inspiration for our people during the difficult time of war. We appreciate the United Kingdom's leadership in supporting Ukraine and our just cause to defend freedom from tyranny and ensure a lasting peace in Ukraine and throughout Europe. More congratulations are coming in for Ukraine on this Independence Day, as Zelensky continues on here that my sincere gratitude to His Majesty King Felipe VI of Spain for his warm wishes on Ukraine's Independence Day. We appreciate your unwavering support for Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity amid Russia's ongoing full-scale aggression. We thank the government and people of Spain for their solidarity and comprehensive assistance to Ukraine. I am confident that Ukraine and Spain, together with our partners, will restore respect for international law and bring peace and security back to Europe. And then this, another post here from Zelensky. Heartfelt gratitude for the greetings of President Emmanuel Macron of France on Ukraine's Independence Day. I deeply appreciate your steadfast leadership and the unwavering solidarity of the French people. France has always stood with us in defense of Ukraine's independence, territorial integrity, and the values of freedom. Your support strengthens the Ukrainian resistance and our resolve to work for a just and lasting peace together. And then finally, once again, I just want to showcase here the letter that President Trump did send to President Zelensky. As Zelensky writes on X, quote, "Dear POTUS, thank you for your heartfelt congratulations on Ukraine's Independence Day. We appreciate your kind words for the Ukrainian people, and we thank the United States for standing shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine in defending what is most valuable: independence, freedom, and guaranteed peace. We believe that by working together, we can put an end to this war and achieve real peace for Ukraine." We're going to keep you up to date with all the developments happening within the war between Russia and Ukraine. And then here, just a closer look at that letter that President Trump sent to President Zelensky, in which he says this in part: "On behalf of the American people, I extend my congratulations and warmest wishes to you and the courageous people of Ukraine as you celebrate 34 years of independence."